Are we ready for a dialogue with a future archaeologist? Right? I mean, I kind of want to figure out how do you go into the future and be an archaeologist at the same time. This is kind of a very interesting concept, and this is an important bit. Markus, as he says, he's inspired and fascinated by science fiction, creativity, the art of shaping the world to come. And this is what we're going to be doing. And his days are spent delving into topics that hold the potential to transform our reality. As we saw with our students this morning, with their little objects transforming a reality. Those are artifacts. And he said, and quote, and I'm going to ask you to join us up here, I highly regard imagination, intuition, competence, intelligence, precision, and playfulness. I'm curious how you throw all these things together. I think many of us in the room. So, Markus, come on up. Good to see you. Good. We're going to sit right there. We're going to see if your microphone works. Have like a test. Go see. Test. No. Oh, talk really loud now. Talk really loud.
Let's see. This is working.
That's working. They both. Whoa!
Hello.
Just try it without that. Just talk for a minute. Say, when were you born? What's your birthday? March?
May 1st.
Okay, it's working.
No sticker for me.
No sticker for you, May 1st. Just try it with that.
Is this working?
Yeah, it's working now. Okay. So, Markus, you have to tell us what a future archaeologist is.
A future archaeologist is someone who... Hey, good morning.
Morning, Chris.
Good morning, Natascha.
Morning.
How are you?
Good. Told you the future was female, wasn't it?
The future's female.
Yeah.
We heard that last night.
Really?
Yeah.
Did we?
With the summer solstice.
And I assume that you might have seen coming as a Foresight expert that I might take over your panel.
We.
Badooms.
Well, I might have.
Really?
Yeah, maybe. But what are we gonna do now?
So basically, I'm wheeling this conversation. I'm in your chair.
Yes,
which
you
means I'm asking the questions.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
are answering, as well as Markus. And I brought some amazing questions. Because some of you who, well...
I need to leave.
All good.
Don't be afraid. So Janelle and I, which is a very dangerous combination, by the way.
Yeah,
it's a match made in heaven, though.
Yeah.
Decided that Chris is not only the initiator of Your 2040, but he's also an expert when it comes to foresight. I mean, he's a professor, and we thought it would be a pity if he did not get the chance to answer great questions on this panel. And so, yeah, Chris. Exactly. You've got 30 years of expertise, more than that. I feel young now. And you help companies and cities and governments to envision their own future. Mm-hmm. And so, could you maybe tell us what foresight means and what it means to you? It's the first question, but it's an easy one.
Can I ask him? No, I can't ask him, no. Thank you, Natascha. Thank you, Janelle. We will discuss this. So for me, it's a privilege to be able to do foresight, and it's actually building bridges between today and tomorrow, and how you help individuals, groups, countries, or us, villages, trying to think about what their futures, futures, could be, so you can begin to guide where you might want or hope your future to be. There's a big difference between just letting stuff happen and guiding and how you might get there. Because as many of the quotes that we chose, I really do believe if you have something in mind where you're trying to go, given what you are understanding is driving change, you have a much better chance of getting there than just letting shit happen. So you make shit happen, excuse me.
all right.
But-
It's allowed on my panel to say shit.
Okay, I won't say anything else than that word, that's okay. But I think that's really important to be able to do that.
Thank you. Markus and I had a great conversation yesterday, and he said something that I found very interesting, which very much actually aligns with what you were saying, even though they're coming from different directions, right? So you are the person standing in 2024 trying to foresee what is going to happen. You're basically the one digging back, in a way. So you said we have to understand the difference between what will the future be and what should it be. Could you maybe elaborate on that one?
Yeah, so when I go on my future archaeological dig and I dig out futures, I never know what I find, so I can't predict what I find, which is totally aligned with foresight. I don't know what will come, but once I see this and I analyze the artifact, for me, it's not the question when will it come, in which year, or say this has to come, but I ask myself all the questions around, for example, desirability, should this happen? And try to involve as many people as possible and as many opinions on that as possible, so that we can say, okay, maybe this is a good idea, shall we pursue it? And this is where it also connects to what Chris says, right? It's very important, if you want to take an active role in maybe shaping the future, to kind of like say, okay, I'm invested in this, it should happen.
Interesting.
You used the word predict, which I find very interesting because usually when I am invited, I say I was invited to host this panel, which I really was, honestly. I really did some research. Really. I did some research because I really did not know the difference between prediction and foresight. You just used the word predict. But Chris yesterday told me there's a really big difference between that. So maybe you could also explain, Chris, what is the difference between prediction and foresight?
Yeah, so for me, this is within the foresight community and the strategy community, it's a long-standing dialogue around those words. And some people use some people use them interchangeably, but I think of them very differently. To me, foresight is much more around storytelling, about the potential, and prediction is really trying to say, like economists do, trying to pretend they know what's going to happen next month, right? I mean, you can get a Nobel Prize for making a fudge factor to fit a curve onto a form. I mean, to data, it's crazy. So you really can't predict. Now, and there are many who do, and give you numbers of what's going to happen. There are futurists who do this, and I just think it's complete baloney. But it's very, very important for me that we look at what science tells us is most likely happening. I heard from Sonia yesterday. And he's as a scientist, he says, well, we're getting close to a time where we can no longer make the equations using science to predict, to understand, using the science, what's going to happen, right? And that's where, for me, we get into the realm of foresight, where it's like, whoa, when we get into this cone of it could go this way, it could go that way. And that, to me, it's very, very, so there's two different parts to that. The numerology and the storyology. Ooh, hey, like that? Hey.
Ooh, yeah.
All right.
Nice one. Markus, hearing what Chris just said, what artifacts are you creating, or which artifacts do you want people to find, like future generations to find from you?
So
that's cool.
So
good question.
Actually, I don't.
I came prepared, my friend.
I don't have particular artifacts I want someone to find, but I hope that people find things that are not just things that are bigger, cheaper, better, or more sustainable that already exist today, because this would be, again, coming from today into the future. So in the future, as I see it in all of us, there will be things around that are around today, just maybe bigger, better, cheaper, whatever. But I hope to find things that we, or unearth, if we want to use archaeological terms, things that don't exist today. Or maybe that we would consider impossible today, to have maybe a meaningful discussion. And also, to add to what Chris said earlier, if you try to predict the future, it sounds so absolute. If someone comes to you and says, this is the future of work, or this is the future of education, it's absolute, it doesn't invite you to a discussion, and you could immediately ask, based on whose opinion is this, right? Or based on what data? Like, how can you say, this is the future? This is a future bias. So the moment you say, this is the future, that's a future bias. What Chris said, and I really love that as well, if you ask yourself, should this be the future of work? You invite people. You want to listen to their opinion, right? No matter where you come from here or from the future, but it's inviting. It's not absolute. It doesn't close the door and says, this is the future I'm telling you, right? So that's very important to me.
No, I agree with that fully.
As we also, I know that we were quite emotional about the play that we saw, and also preparing this panel. I hear a lot of hope in the statement that you said, because it's not, there's a lot of, it's open, right? So the future is open and it's plausible and everything is there, basically. There's a lot of abundance. Chris, we do know still that we are sort of in a bubble atmosphere here. How to envision future if you can't really envision tomorrow, like we saw in the play, right? When you are afraid of the night, how do you actually take those sort of realities into your foresight?
Yeah, it's a really great question and a very, very difficult one to get through our own fears, right? And so 4 days a week I'm an optimist, and 3 days a week I'm not. Right? And to me, this is a juggle which I have to sort of meander between some of the realities which we see with the, what was it, CNN, the constant negative news. Right? To meander between some of these very challenging realities which we see, and I'm not going to start mentioning them because we can go down to a very deep rabbit hole. And then the belief in the human potential to be creative, innovative, and very powerful. And when I speak to some of the students here I've spoken with, I talk with my two children, they're 24 and 26, who I always carry with me up here on the pictures. I talk to them, they are very hopeful about what they're going to be able to do. Like my son, when I talked and showed him the Rhone Glacier, when we went up there a few years ago, I said, here's the Rhone Glacier. When I lived here 30 years ago, it was right here at the end of the valley. And now there's a lake there and the glacier's up there. And there's a little placket which said in 1982, this is the grounding, the foundation for the bridge to go into the tunnel where you can walk into the glacier. Yeah? And I was sort of talking about this and getting heavy with loss. And he just kind of looked at me and said, Papa, the glacier's there. It's not there. I said, that's just a story. This is my reality. So stop it. And that was an incredibly important moment for me to really say, let's not look at the past with sorrow. Let's look at today and the future as a context we need to be working with to make it beautiful for him and beautiful for all the students. That's what you know.
Oh, Chris. Okay. I did not see this coming, though. But I'm not the foresight expert here. Are you okay? Do you need a tissue? Do you need a tissue?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
Thanks.
good.
Thank you.
Markus said something yesterday that also really much aligns with what you're just saying, Chris. He said that there is the sense of possibility versus a sense of reality.
Yeah.
So reality, the glacier, his reality, right? But there's also the possibility.
That's
Please
great
tell us
question.
more about that.
So the sense of reality is this thing that is driven by data, facts, the things we know. We can ask people or our clients if we're a company, we can ask experts, and they all give us data in the realm of the sense of reality, right? And it is also this thing that keeps us safe or alive, that we're not being overrun by a bus in a city, for example. But if we only create futures with this sense, we are limited, right? I mean, it's still a vast space, but it's just limited on what we know now. But if you tap into your sense of possibility, which every one of us have, and the children use it more, we somehow lost it, but we all have it. We see different things. We see things that might be impossible today. I was mentioning yesterday in one of the sessions I gave in the deep dialogues, if we all now travel back to 1924, 100 years ago, and I would have come to you and said, can you imagine to be in La Punt and in New York on the same day? You would have thought, you're crazy, go away, there's an institution over there, they'll lock you away. But for us today, right, it's like, what do you mean? I mean, I go on a train and then on a plane and I'm there. But this was impossible in 1924. Like the fastest thing you could do in 1924 with your sense of reality, somehow get to Friedrichshafen at the Lake of Constance, I don't know, with a train or a horse carriage, and then you need 81 hours with a Zeppelin to New York. So you can try to make that Zeppelin faster and whatever, but, and the funny thing in this story is that it didn't take us 100 years to make this possible, right? It's not possible since yesterday. It was just 3 years later that Charles Lindbergh was the first person who flew over the Atlantic. So I cannot tell you, and I think Chris also knows, what happens in 2027. But if within 3 years, 100 years ago, something that was impossible was suddenly possible, I can promise you that in 2027 or 20, not just 2040, we will see things we would have thought, this is impossible. And I think I want to add to something you said, Chris, with this, building and envisioning the future. We have two prime examples here and here. I work a lot with these things. These are, for those who don't know, these kind of like Victorian postcards. They're from 1899. And artists were asked for the Paris World Expo to imagine the year 2000. And they were, by the way, printed on tobacco things and cards. Yeah. But if you look at this, and there are dozens of others, if you just type in Victorian postcards, year 2000, you'll see them all. We all know in this room that this is not how the year 2000 looked, and this is not how the year 2000 looked. And this is also not how 1990 looked, and this is not how 1980 looked, and 70, and see where I'm going? This is not even how 1910 looked. This is not the future. So if you want to imagine 2040 for tomorrow for this project or further reaching future, we have to overcome the present lock-in, because every element we see here and here was around sometimes already for a couple of years. So these artists, they were not futurists, but these artists who tried their best have something that I call the present lock-in, right? So when we think for La Punta, the schoolhouse, the train station, the mountain, let's try to overcome our present lock-in. Let's not create these kind of things that in 2040 we look at them and say, this is not even 2025.
That's really great. Really great. Thanks.
Chris, but
Yes.
how do we identify the key drivers of change right now? Like,
Yep.
we know Martin Luther King, who was the first visionist in terms of like, he gave us a vision through, I had a dream, right? So he looked into the future. What are the key drivers? How do we identify them, and how to not end up with this kind of, blockage, kind of?
Great question, and a difficult one again. It depends. Yeah.
I'm the lawyer. You're not allowed
Yeah, no,
to
you're the
answer
lawyer.
questions
You're
with
just like,
"it depends."
"Damn,
This
man."
is the first answer that you get from lawyers.
I know.
Very
So,
true.
can I claim the fifth? Do we have the fifth? You have that over here too? Like you can. So when thinking about what's driving change, it's actually quite a fascinating topic. And so these sort of also can exemplify some of the things which one was perceiving was driving change at that time. For example, how to get it moved between places faster, or this desire to be dislocated, in 1898 over the countryside. And so what we very often do or looking for as driving change is, I think all of us know in many ways what's driving change. And what we do, we try to organize our lenses. We call these the lenses in which we look at change into very specific categories and try to consciously say, okay, what's driving social change right now? And to ask ourselves that, to ask others, what do you think is driving change? And so you go around as like a sensor network. Or with technological change, the same thing. You can read their various magazines, you can look at various reports. You just begin to filter out what we call weak signals or trends. The weak signals are little things you read. Like the other day, I was at a dinner, or an apéro, as we do in Switzerland, always an apéro. You don't really have dinners, you have apéros, we were talking to a woman who had her Instagram AI avatar kidnapped.
Okay.
Right? So she had an avatar that had over 500,000 followers on Instagram, and it was hijacked. And so here we have an artificial being who was kidnapped And I thought to myself, whoa, I've never heard of this before. And this is what we call as a weak signal. Begin to think, what would that mean if more of our online personalities got kidnapped? We've been hacked. I mean, if we put our hands up, how we've been hacked, right? Our banks very often. But when your whole identity is kidnapped and held for ransom, and our whole lives are becoming loaded and locked into these phones, into your home, you can't get into your home without your identity. All of a sudden, I was like, this is an interesting new possibility as a driver, right? This is something, so we try to think about these and then sift out, and depending on the situation, what's important and what's not important. So for me, I see there's no exact science to it. It all depends, on the context of the situation we're working with.
Very interesting.
How does he do that? Ask him that.
Yeah.
Could you please ask him that question?
Yeah, could you please answer the same question?
I actually want to add, because it was beautiful what you said, what I heard a lot, and I want to maybe emphasize that you mentioned a couple of times this saying something in words. And for me, that is a lot more powerful than a visualization. You know what the problem is, like, with these kinds of things that have the present lock-in? The moment you try to create an image of a future, you have to visualize how that thing should work. And that how
interesting
causes the present lock-in. So I would have a very critical view, philosophically, as a future archaeologist, to use graphical visualizations. But if you have the word, if I would say in this realm of the digital identities, and we can now have a discussion about what does it mean to say goodbye to a loved one who passes away. We can have a very interesting discussion, but if we try to visualize this, we need to think, so this digital avatar is still around, let's draw it, or is it on a phone? And then 10 years later it looks old. It doesn't look, But if you just say that, or what if humanity becomes part of the net, like for real, like the network? And you don't visualize it with chips or Wi-Fi signals, it's a lot more powerful.
Interesting.
So it's also about inviting our senses.
It right? causes, because everybody has a Kopfkino, we say in German. Is there an English term for Kopfkino?
Kopfkino, head movie?
Cinema, head movie?
Is there daydreams or...
Not a daydream. Like if I tell you, imagine you are part of the net. Every one of you probably imagines something different. Right? But if I create a visualization, again, it comes this absolute thing. I will be wrong, and we won't have a discussion of how it should be, because I already said it's like this. And that's why I like this idea of speaking or writing, just sentences that allow for imagination. And the topic of this is also storytelling. This allows for the stories. Just saying this, what if we're part of the net? You can write 1,000 stories.
I'm a huge believer in cooperation over competition. So having one of you on the panel that is actually digging backwards, also saying or writing books about the future, the German, the title of your book in English is Back to the Future. So like the movie. So having you going the reverse engineering kind of way, and you doing the Foresight part, how could the two personas, work together to create something that is great?
So I wrote a chapter in the book about that.
Did you? Tell me, Markus. So how are we going to work together?
So the way how I picture it is that, when you come with your sense of reality and the ideas and the anticipation you have, and someone comes with these completely imaginative, maybe like fictional things that sound like impossible, when you reverse engineer time, right? So you go like from whatever moment in time it is and think, what is a step before that needs to happen for this to happen? And you deconstruct this artifact, I would meet Chris. And Chris would see something that he might not have seen, and I learn from him where he comes from. Because like even the, in my opinion, nicest artifacts I could even come up with make no sense if we cannot relate them to the present. So these two need to meet.
Yeah.
So we would meet in the middle, and not in the middle time-wise, in the middle intellectually.
Yeah. So can I? So I find it really quite interesting for me. Every one of us, we would talk about our future and what we believe the future will be a different dialogue. Some of us have a Venn diagram which has maybe 80% overlap. Some would only have make 10, and there might be just 1% overlap. You know, I think this is what's interesting to me. And this is, I find the artifacts which Markus creates, which I always find so fascinating, allows you to have something around which you can talk about perceptions. Right? I think this is really important. So what I perceive and what you perceive, for both, say you're talking about this, like I just hold this bottle up, I see a black bottle, and we could argue about the fact that you might see something that has white on it, or I see a little white thing on it. And I could argue vehemently that the white thing is there, and you'd say, no, there's no white on it. And so this is, for me, also with our future possibilities. And it's how what we see as a possibility for the future is different. So the artifact allows one also to have that dialogue about what you see, what you don't see. And so then we can also say, well, how did that happen? Where did that battery technology come from? And you can begin to fantasize in a way. And this is what we not predict, but fantasize. I think the fantasy is also really important to imagine. This is why this book is so important for me. This is all about fantasy in our minds, the realities we can believe we can create. Right? And that's why I think it's so cool.
What you can also do, you know, with these imagined artifacts, like let's say this bottle is some specific artifact, you can actually hold the artifact against the principles, and you can check it for robustness, because it could be you develop an artifact or a vision of the future where, for example, supply chains are secure. Doesn't matter, because however you solved it is robust against that. So if you think these are like almost like mandated, maybe you can take some out. So it takes complexity out sometimes because of this possibility space, which is so big.
Coming back to artifacts as well, because now we've been talking about them. What is an artifact for you? What does it personally mean, and how do you use them in your work?
So personal, like why I like it, because it engages with more senses than just reading like numbers. You can feel it. Depending on the artifact, you can smell certain things or hear certain things. And when I show it to people, be it in an exhibition or a meeting, or you see sometimes how people react. There's like body language involved. You see if they are like a little bit like, ooh, you know, or if they come closer, they want to touch it, or they ask, oh, this is so cool, when can I have it? Then you know that you're onto something. But if you see that, you know, there's a lot of things going on if an artifact is in the room that has a story that tells you, like I said yesterday, it is a witness of a time and people that don't exist now, right? So they tell us something about a society where different things happen, maybe different rules apply. And so important. What is very important, I think, is to let go when you look at the artifact of what is going on now technologically, or from a rules, regulations, law perspective, because it might be that this is illegal today, but what is illegal today might not be legal tomorrow. Who knows, right? So,
I think some places legalize pot, right? So marijuana. So you know,
for example,
it used to be illegal, now it's not. So artifacts, you know, I love artifacts, which is, you can see my room here is full of little artifacts. All of them have different meanings. And what's interesting to me is they'll have a different meaning for you or for me. Right? And then you can have a dialogue around them, which I find so fascinating. And this is what I just come to this idea about having a story, that I can tell a story and you can tell a story about the same artifact without anybody knowing these actual origins. And then, so this is what I also find so really interesting, is with these artifacts, is exactly that. Like, you can pick anything up there and you can have different stories about them. Essentially because the person leaving it behind did not know how it would be used in the future and what it would actually mean to you. Right. Okay, so which artifact do you want future generations find from you? Ooh. I would never want to be in court against you.
Nobody wants. Sorry.
Ow!
I'm sorry,
Uh-oh.
Mike.
Don't play with it. Don't play with it.
I
Okay.
think yeah, we're
right.
still.
We're still here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we gave you some time
Okay.
to think.
I think in the artifact, we're not going to have any speakers, any microphones. What artifact would you like to find? I would actually like future generations to find the fewest number of artifacts for me possible. Actually, I think that's what, I don't want them to find my stuff. I would like them to not find much except memories and stories.
Okay.
That would be my wish, just stories.
What about you?
I am in the camp with Chris, but I just recalled a very interesting story of a kid whose father died when it was very young, and there was like someone created a YouTube video about the story. This kid posted on Reddit. So let me just quickly tell you the story because it's so interesting about it. So when the kid was small, this little boy played with his father on a trusty old Xbox racing game. And they had a lot of fun and spent many, many hours playing this game. And for those who have played racing games in that Xbox era, the fastest lap is recorded in form of a ghost. So the father dies, and years later, this kid finds the Xbox. And it powers on this Xbox, and it starts this game. And guess what? There was the ghost from the father who had the fastest lap. Now this kid is playing the same racetracks it played with the father, with the ghost, trying to surpass it. But you know what it didn't do? When it became so good that it would beat the father, the kid would stop in front of the finishing line to let the father pass because it knew exactly that if it crosses faster, it deletes the ghost. That's what I meant earlier with what does it mean to say goodbye to someone in this digital age?
Wow.
This is a future artifact. This is what they do. I don't know what it does, but this is what they do.
Beautiful.
That's an artifact.
I will open my panel, our panel, to the audience now. But a key takeaway, because when you ask me what is an artifact to you, looking back, I would say, oh, it's something with a huge value, right? Because there's so much history in it, or it's made of cork or stone or something that doesn't exist anymore. But now having this kind of ghost in mind, right? Something that is actually,
really cool.
it's a different approach now, and very beautiful. Thank you for sharing the stories. Janelle is crying. No, all good? Good. Everybody's crying. I'd never wanted to make the both of you cry. So please, if there is anybody who has a question to these great gentlemen, Ben, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
That's all right.
He's got a big mouth. I mean, big voice.
I want to comment on the fact that you're both fantastic storytellers, and everything about what we're doing here is about telling those stories. I would ask, could you advise us some tips on being better storytellers? Because everyone here has got great ideas. If they can't communicate it, they're kind of lost.
Oh, no, you go ahead. No, really, that's all right.
I think if you can relate whatever idea you have to people, like to a person, fictional or not, I think it becomes very powerful because then you can apply to hearts. And from my perspective, don't tie to facts only. Like a story that says just because this is like this, it means this has to be like this. So open up, tie it to a person, or tell it from a person's perspective. Even if you're the schoolhouse or the train station or the mountain or the river, the meadow.
So I have a slightly different. How many of you in here also consider yourselves to be good storytellers? There are many of you here. Who else is a good storyteller? Eric, you're a good storyteller. Sabina, Crystal, right? I think there are many of you who didn't put your hands up that I know you're good storytellers, right? And I think it's a great question to ask, Ben. And to me, different people tell different stories in different ways depending on the context in which they're telling it. and who's going to be hearing it. And when I tell a story to my children, when they're 6 years old or when they're 26, it's a very different way to tell the story. It might be the same story, but it'll tell it differently. So for me, the first thing to think about is like, what is it we want to share? And how do we want it to land? And who's going to be hearing it? And how are they going to hear it? And so if you think about our stories we're creating over the next day, between now and tomorrow, is, there's going to be these weavings of this place, this magical place, which we've now come to get to know. And there are a number of individuals here who are from here. And so we have to imagine this place today and tomorrow and release ourselves from preconceived notions of what could or could not be. I think this is what you were talking with the lock-in. The buildings we have, like the Keza, which one can go tour this afternoon as Genus Loci, have been here for hundreds of years, and they will still be here. The life in that place has evolved from being a very, very hard farming life to a hunting lodge, so now today, over years, family looking to a museum. And it could go back to many other things in the future. You could imagine what these things could be. So to me, it's trying to think of an arc, trying to make it coherent and cohesive. I wouldn't have unicorns prancing through the valleys, but a little bit of magic can always help. Right? There's, to me, the difference between magic and unicorns, And so that's what, and I think that's what I would say.
I would love to add something to that.
Please.
There's
You're the lawyer.
one thing that I think, well, it was my grandmother who said it. She said, it's not about what do you want to bring across or what you want to say, right? We tend to say, my opinion is that and that and that, right? So we want to bring our opinion out there. It is way more crucial to understand what do you, Ben, or what do the people need to hear to actually make change happen.
Yeah.
It's a different perspective.
Yeah. Totally agree with you.
Right. Another hand, please.
Let's go to the left.
Okay. Good point. Okay, thank you.
No, go ahead. I'm not doing the panel.
Do you want to go first, mister? No. Yeah, you were so... thank you very much. Wait. I feel like the louder you bring your story, the more vision you can kind of enlight with a society. Mm-hmm. So the loud comes also with power, right? So the more power you have, the more loud your voice can be. So how do we make sure that maybe we create artifacts with people who are maybe not as loud or maybe don't have a voice, and make them also include to draw their future, which maybe is a very different future of what we believe it should be. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Because I feel, sometimes I feel very sad living abroad and seeing all these beautiful people and they don't have a voice at all. And we make them really quiet. And if we would really listen, it would take a bit more time. But we don't give them the time because we are very, very, very fast. So yeah, how do we participate with that?
So basically coming back to the play we saw, how do we create futures for those inside and outside the wall?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Walls.
Last year I was at the Dubai Future Forum, and I told this story already in a conversation during this event, but maybe also interesting for all of you. So this is a very, very important point. I was at a session where there was an artist from Ghana and Morocco, and they were using Afrofuturism to create their visions of the future, beautiful visions of black and white, men and women on this, beautiful. And the audience was mainly white, right? There were some questions in the audience, but at some point this artist said, look, when I create my visions of the future, the apocalypse for us is behind us. For you, the apocalypse is in front of you. And I will never forget that probably in my life. Because we colonized them, slavery, whatever, and now climate change, the end of democracy, the end of privacy. So I'm totally with you, and whoever creates the future, obviously here we are a bubble, but involve these people. Because if you think the future is bright, you create something completely different than when you think 1.5 degrees makes me jump off a bridge or makes me want to lose my life, right? It's so different, right? So I can only applaud you for that comment, and it is very dear to my heart that we do that when we create futures. Ask people who think differently. It is valuable.
Yeah.
And I really
is
feel
valuable.
they need to get a voice in a
Yes.
sense of a society as also powerful, because sometimes we hear them speak and then it's just like, that's, yeah. But then we go on,
Yeah.
you know.
There's also a term, just one quick one, for you, if you haven't heard of it, there's this decolonizing the futures. There's books about it, but just use the search engine of your preference and type in decolonizing the future, because we tend, again, as Europeans or Western world, Northern Hemisphere, to tell the whole world about glass cupolas and flying cars, and we don't involve people in Morocco, Ghana, whatever. So we need to be careful not to colonize just geographically, but now we colonize time, right, with our Western thinking. So let's be careful. Also with what we do here, obviously we do it for this region,
Right.
but if we are open, I think it can only help your stories today and tomorrow.
May I add something from the very first conference in Lax? There was one architect. He's not here this year. I think Ben and I discussed it yesterday, right? He said something that is still one of the quotes that I will never forget. He said, "It is not important who is in the room. It is important who is not in the room." And so, never forget that when you tell your stories, because it's not about our bubble, it's about who is outside the bubble, and how could we include the bubble that is not that is not present here, but just take in all the considerations.
So I agree. Excuse me. I agree 100% with that when we're thinking about futures in general and in the big picture. And I also think we can do what we can do. Right. And so if each of us walk forward with this consciousness and this awareness to incorporate those who are not in the room, that can be a step forward. I can't incorporate 6.8 billion people. It's impossible. I was barely just managing this with this group. It's enough for me. Every year we have become a more diverse, more engaged, more focused, more diffuse group. We've got many modifiers. To me, we can focus on, I think for me, it's my work with this, I focus on what I can do, what I can't. Right? And I focus on those actions that we can instigate, we can influence, and try very hard to get those as a network of networks so that the ripples and the thinking can go out further and further and further. And as long as we walk forward with it, then I'm good with that. And I know there are many voices who are not here, and there are a lot more that were in the room that are not. Many of us were talking about, as I ask all of you, so how are you doing? You like it? And one who said this morning, next week I'm going to a climate conference, going to a group with similar conversations around this, and guaranteed it will not be as diverse as this group. Guaranteed that the conversations will be laser focused on what needs to be done, and not like this group where we have students, citizens, of all ages. So to me, this is the kind of communities we need to be seeing happening all over the world again and again and again. Because if we collectively think about our positive futures, the potential, as you said, which I love, the probability of potential, then we create a different direction.
So open
Right.
up, but then focus.
But open up and focus, and make that future happen which we hope and we want.
I now get the feeling of what it is to look at Janelle, and she's like,
Yeah.
so we've got 5 more minutes. Is there, yeah, please.
We're working here.
Ooh,
Try again.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I'm discovering every day, every hour, every minute something new here. I want, first question, on your side, you're an archaeologist. An archaeologist is a scientific person. And I was a kid in Lebanon, as we were talking yesterday, and we were going in Baalbek and so on, and we were doing a bit of archaeology, and it needs a lot of work to get to the artifacts and then make a story out of it and understand what this artifact did in the story, how was it used, how was it reused, and so on and so forth. So that, I think, is a very interesting fact to look in the future, how is something being used in the future past. And on the other side, Chris, I have the privilege to work in your Foresight team once in a while with very interesting discussions. And we're looking at from the other side, and it's interesting to integrate. I'm always talking of the mathematic integrale of the needs. We're looking at the needs, and we're trying to project those needs in the future, looking at different scenarios.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, I'm always trying to understand how do you put those two together. You already tried to answer earlier,
Yeah.
but I'm still not convinced where we can match
Sure, okay.
those two knowledges.
thank you.
So, to me, there's a very interesting differentiation between needs and desires. And we think about the satisfaction of human needs. And very often, if you think of Maslow's pyramid, we've got the base and these basics and how those needs need to be satisfied. So when we're thinking of our future, we have to think of the evolution of the needs of a group. Right? Now, what I need and what you need might not be the same, right? And our perceptions. But at the end of the day, we need water, we need food, we need air, we need shelter. You know, these are the needs, these are real needs. Our desires can be quite different, right? What we desire. And this is what I'm thinking is interesting for the characters. What do you believe your character will desire, right? And as we're moving into this new context. So the work we're trying to do, specifically here with the ETH, is thinking about when we're looking at the school of the future, what are these students and our teachers, our researchers, what are they going to need in order to do their work? And what do you think are their desires? Desires make you come back. We think of our partner like the hotel, the Schweizerhof Hotel. It's a fantastic hotel right across the street from the train station. If they don't satisfy the needs of every one of their customers, they'll never come back, right, of a hotel. But you pick their desires, and you create loyalty, you create love. You create a desire to go back, right? And this is what's interesting for me with the differentiation between needs and desires. And that's how I think about this with also the artifact to me. Well, you need this, you desire this. How do you think about these two different things, right?
I think what I'm hearing and what is also important is in this differentiation, you really need to go and take the time and work into those artifacts philosophically, because Hotel Schweizerhof was not a positive example, but if you think of AI and automation and something and now I'm saying fulfills your need, would do something fundamentally different than if it would fill your desires.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking of a negative example. What if you desire a gun to do something? Should it do it or not? You will get into a completely different discussion as if there is a need for water or shelter. It's very important what you said. Take every word and think what they mean when you look at these things that you dig out. And you cannot buy these things in. I can also tell you that you cannot just buy an artifact and think that this is what I should do. You need, as a company or organization, you need to work yourself into it. You need to be almost like, not ask yourself, what shall I invest in the future of this company, but am I invested in the future? And then you take your time.
Is that a timer that you made? Okay.
Thanks, Diego.
Yeah, like it. Thank you. Thank you, Diego. Timekeeper. Thanks for that. So the time is up.
Yeah. That's
It was a pleasure. It really was.
Thank you.
I hope you're okay.
Yeah, very much so.
Breath is back to normal.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
great.
no
You
heart
did a
attack
great
on
job.
the horizon. Thank you very much.